Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Home Ed 360 podcast, where we connect, inspire, and support families on their home education journey. I'm your host, Rebecca Wood, and today we're diving into a conversation that's both timely and powerful: school choice, and more specifically, the part of the conversation that doesn't get talked about enough: curriculum choice. Across the nation, more and more parents are stepping up to advocate for their right to choose not just where their children learn, but what they're learning. While much of the public debate has centered on school buildings, public, private, charter, online, there is a growing recognition that real educational freedom also means having a say in curriculum. In this episode, we'll unpack what the school choice movement looks like on the national stage and here in Idaho. We'll explore questions like, what is the red state strategy? What role does ILA play in this conversation? And how can curriculum choice be a key to educational innovation and not just regulation? Most importantly, we want you to walk away knowing that your voice matters. The choices you make for your children are part of a bigger movement, and those choices are helping shape the future of education in powerful ways. We're going to be taking ideas and thoughts from a book called The Parent Revolution by Corey DeAngelis. Today on our episode, we have Senator Stephen Thayn with us, and we also have Janet Cox to talk about these topics that we want to talk about today. And so before we jump in and talk about our questions that we have for the episode, we want to introduce Senator Stephen Thayn a little bit. So, Senator Thayn, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how did you begin fighting for school choice and parents' rights in education?
Well, Rebecca, it's an honor to be on your program, and I'd love to do that. I want to clarify that I'm a former state senator. I'm not currently in office, so don't call me. No, you can call me, but they don't let me vote anymore. So how I got started in education was 45 years ago. And kind of to sum it up, most people don't know where public education in the United States started, but it was in Massachusetts in the 1830s and 40s with Horace Mann. And he basically believed the state could perfect society if they could choose, if the state chose the curriculum and they hired the teachers, because he basically felt like parents were the corrupting influence in society. And there was a man at the time named Orestes Brownson who argued against that. He said, in a free society like the United States, the people give light to the government. And so in order to give the power to determine what the people are going to learn is giving the power of the master to the servant. So that really made a lot of sense to me, that this is really a parental responsibility. And so looking at all education outcomes, almost always it depends upon the quality of the parental involvement. That's the number one factor. And so parents should choose the curriculum. They should choose where the kids go to school. I got involved in politics because as I was teaching school at Valley View High School, I was teaching Spanish. My way to work one day in about 2000, Governor Kempthorne at the time talked about bringing pre-K to Idaho, universal pre-K. And to me, that made no sense because it was eroding upon parental responsibilities. So I decided to run for office. First time I wasn't successful. I ran against Brad Little, a high school classmate of mine, who's now governor. But next year I was successful, and I was interested in education and empowering parents, particularly so they can choose the curriculum and have choices. So I worked with, he was a Democrat at the time, Brandon Durst. He was in the House. And we started working on what became the Advanced Opportunities Program, which is an in-school voucher system in the public schools, which has been expanded now to private school students also. Last year, there's almost 45,000 students that took advantage of this, taking dual credit classes, paying for career technical education tests, which I'm very sensitive about and happy about because I'm the chairman of a Payette River Regional Technical Academy. And last year we had 120 some students that graduated from our academy with career technical education certificate. So since that time, I looked at the PSIMS model, or the Parent Curated Education model. Some of you know it as ILA. I said parents are choosing their curriculum, they're choosing who's doing the teaching, and they get a stipend for some expenses. Well, that sounds like a perfect system to me. So I got on board pretty quickly.
Thanks for that introduction. It's nice to hear about your background and how you taught in school, and that kind of got you involved with the model of school, and starting off originally with that, with the pre-K choice, and how that kind of impacts parents' choice when their kids are just so young. So thank you, and we're really glad to have you on today with us, and we're really grateful for all you've done to fight for our rights as parents in education. And then we also have on the wonderful Janet Cox today. Janet, if you want to just say a quick hi.
Yeah, so I've been choosing different school options for my kids since 2005. And so Idaho is great in that we have a lot of options, a lot more than some other states. But there's always pushback against having choice and having options in education. And so it's been interesting to watch this pendulum swing and see what has happened over the last 20 years, and to see where we're at today and how parents are starting to be heard even more as we're moving this movement forward.
It's amazing to see where we're at today and to see all the people that have led us into this. So from there, let's go ahead and start on what does school choice mean. So let's go ahead and define that, and then talk about our model specifically, which we've already kind of mentioned, which is PSIM, but then further into that of parent curated education and what that means to both of you.
So school choice on a basic level means parents getting to decide where their kids go to school. So most of our public schools are set up that based on your address, here's the school that you would go to. This is the school you're zoned for. We don't do that in anything else in our world. We don't say this is the grocery store you have to go to because this is your address. Everything else in America, you get to choose what works best for your family. And so when this movement started, it was things like offering charter schools, which is another school that you can choose to go to. Most of those would have waiting lists and lotteries because parents wanted other options for their kids in their neighborhood schools. It then grew into having online schools. It grew into having private schools. All of these different options are choices of where you send your students to school. That's what a lot of people define school choices, is where does your student go to school and how does your student do school? Do they homeschool? Do they private school? Do they charter school? Are they in a public school? And that's the basic definition. And we are talking about also expanding that it's also about choosing what your students learn and how they learn those. So it's that curriculum piece that you choose. So what our parents do, and we've struggled sometimes with finding a name for what our parents do, because it looks a lot like homeschooling, which is legally not participating in the public school system. But our parents have chosen to participate in the public school system through ILA. And so they have a teacher support, they have resources, they take the public school test. So they're in the world of public school. So they're not homeschooling in the traditional sense. And we've used the term home education. We've tried to define what is the difference with our model and what do we call it. Senator Thayn came up with the parent-supported instructional model, or his PSIM term, that says this is a public school that parents are very involved in and they're supporting. Another term I heard recently was parent curated education, that parents are taking and choosing bits and pieces. They're not sitting around the kitchen table with mom teaching everything like people think a traditional homeschool situation, but they're choosing an online curriculum, an in-person class, working with the teacher for this subject, and pulling all those pieces together to make the best education for their kids. I think as parents, we do that with everything we do for our kids. When we're grocery shopping, most of us don't just shop from one store. We pick up things here and there. We grab the different pieces that our family needs. When we're looking for activities for our kids, most of us don't just say we're going to go to the YMCA and do the activities at the YMCA and that's all we're going to do. No, we do one activity at the YMCA, we do one with a private piano teacher. We do and pull activities together to make something that works best for our kids. And I think that's what the ILA model really does well, is it allows parents to pull in different pieces into their school choice. So you're not just choosing where you go to school, but you're choosing how that school looks inside of that school choice option.
That was perfectly well said, Janet. I love how you brought in the analogy so that we could think about it a little bit different way.
The national definition of school choice tends to center around leaving the public school system. Vouchers, expense accounts, education savings accounts, things like that, which I think is an important, and I'm very supportive of those efforts. In Idaho, we're really ahead of the national model, but we defined it a little bit differently, and that is choice within the public school system. So up until this year, actually, Idaho didn't have any, according to the national definition, any real school choice. We had charter schools, but we didn't have an ESA, we didn't have vouchers, we didn't have anything like that until House Bill 93 passed. And I think one of the reasons that it passed is because the legislators wanted to be on the national map. So now we are. However, kind of giving ahead a little bit probably, but however, there's some opposition to the parent curated education model because it is not viewed as school choice, like a national school choice definition. So hopefully the legislators in Idaho will see that we're really ahead of the pack as far as school choice goes, because as Janet explained, you can do something at the YMCA or a piano teacher, or you can go to an online school or your local school, or you can do homeschool. You can do all of that in Idaho. And so that will play out, I think, as we have further in our discussion.
Yeah. So are we saying that the parent curated model, that's what we want a legislature to understand and accept as school choice?
Absolutely. Because I think a lot of them don't view it as school choice like a voucher or an education savings account.
So let's go ahead and talk about.
I think you've got a bit of a pendulum. So the Republicans are saying we want school choice, but they look at us and say, you're not real school choice. You're not the voucher or the free choice. You're not far enough along the pendulum to be part of our team. And the Democrats say, we want everybody to be part of public school. We don't want to open up vouchers and all of these other options. And they look at us and they say, but you're too much of a school choice option, so you're not on our team either. What we need to do is help both of these groups realize we're actually fitting into both of their camps. From the Republican side, that they're saying we want more school choice, we're already providing more school choice than you traditionally have in public school. We are on your side who are saying we want kids in public school. We don't want kids leaving our public school system to go to private schools or these other options. We are on your side. We have done this within the public school system. Our kids are public school students. And so if we can help right now, we're kind of being excluded by both sides of saying, well, you're not far enough our direction. When in reality, we are more on both sides because we have found this sweet spot in the middle that we are fully in support of public schools and choice within public school. And we're fully in support of parents choosing what's best for their kids. So what we need to do is help both of these sides see we are actually the perfect compromise because we are within the school choice and we are within the freedom. So instead of both of them saying you're on the other side, we need to help them see we actually can be on both of your sides as well.
And in some ways, we are providing more school choice than a voucher system or an ESA does. Because under parent curated model, parents can choose the curriculum and the textbooks they want to choose. And if you go to private school, the school still chooses the curriculum that your student is going to be taught out of. Now, you might like their curriculum better because you might like the philosophy of that school, but really where we're giving individual families the right to choose the curriculum they want based upon state standards, it's more school choice than anywhere in the nation. So, Jen, I'm pushing back just a little bit. I think this is better than anything else out there.
I would agree.
Yeah, good. We're all in agreement here. So let's talk about what happened in Idaho legislature this year. We know that there was some big events that occurred, some big scares that occurred for maybe shutting down ILA. Can you guys please tell us more about that and what happened?
Well, Senator Thayn already mentioned House Bill 93, which passed, which opened up options for education funds to go to private schools. And then Senator Thayn presented a bill that would have put a level of an umbrella of protection around our model and said the legislature is supporting these private schools, we're supporting public schools, and we also support this parent-supported instruction model. That bill got held because some of our legislators were actually having concerns about the ILA model based on incorrect information that they had been given about how the money flows from the school to the partners to parents, concerns about our test scores, and just a lot of confusion and misinformation about our program in general. And so there was a couple of bills that were presented that would have very negatively impacted the ILA program and probably shut us down. One would have shut us down pretty much immediately, and the other one, I believe, would have shut us down within a year. And those bills were brought forward by some of the senators and representatives. And our parents got very involved in reaching out to their legislators, sharing their stories, telling them why this model was working for their families, and that legislation actually died and didn't go forward. We do know that that legislation is being reworked and will likely be back this next year, which is part of the reason why we're continuing to have these conversations, to help keep our parents in the loop of what's happening at the legislature and help start educating those legislators now before we're playing defense, to help them understand why this model is important, why it's good in Idaho, and how they can support it going forward instead of fighting against it. It also is important for each of our legislators to know someone using this model, because your stories really make a difference. When they have a question, for them to have someone they can reach out to and say, hey, I just heard this about ILA. Is that true? Some of the things and the rumors that were being spread around are things that are completely untrue, like that we were using state funds to pay for families to go to Disneyland, or that we were buying full-size trampolines. It's very easy for us to show legislators that that's not what's happening in the program. But if that's the only thing they've ever heard about the program and nobody's ever given them any other information, it's also very easy for them to believe that wrong information. They're so busy and they've got their hands in so many different things and they're trying to know about everything, that unless we make sure they know that this is an issue that's important to their constituents, and this is an issue that we are going to step up as mama bears and come in and fight for, that it may not be an issue that they even feel like matters or that they care about. And I think that's one of the things I came away from the book about the Parent Revolution, is parents nationwide are stepping up and saying, this matters to us. So legislators, if you want us to vote for you, this better matter to you too.
And I'd like to add a thought, especially on the Senate side, where I spent more of the time this last session lobbying for or against different bills. There are several senators on the Senate Education Committee that trust the institution more than families. They look at families that aren't doing a good job, that have mental problems or aren't very well educated or whatever, and they apply that to all parents. That's really what they're doing. And then they look at the best teacher they could possibly imagine in public education, and they think every public school teacher in the system this is what they are. Well, the truth of the matter is, in Idaho, 24% of fourth graders are below basic in math and 39 below basic in reading. And below basic means you're not at grade level. So it's failing at least a quarter of the kids. And the whole thing about school choice, and what those really favor the traditional public school system, is those that are successful, the students that are successful in the current system, are staying because they're being successful. But when you have 30 or almost 40% of the students that aren't successful, they need another option. And that's what's driving school choice nationwide.
Perfect. So let's move on to that. Let's move on to nationwide. What is the nature of the national school choice movement? And is it gaining or losing interest among parents? Are families wanting this? Are they not?
Well, I'll take that one to begin with. So Milton Friedman started, I forget what it was called at the time. It's now called Ed Choice. It's out of Indianapolis. In 1955, he wrote that there's some reason for the government to fund education, but there's no real justification for them to run education. So he came up with this idea of vouchers. So it took 40 years before it got any traction. So it was in the late 90s before much of anything happened. And then over the next 20 years or so, quite a few bills were passed. But then in 1921 through 2021 and 2023, there were over 32 bills adopted to either expand current programs or develop new ones in 19 states. And so currently there's 31 states, actually 32 because Idaho adopted a school choice proposal or bill last year, that have 68 or 69 different programs. And that has happened mostly in the last 5 years. So this is picking up speed. When we get to the impact on the red state strategy, we'll talk about how people have lost elections because of their stance on school choice.
And I would add that I have seen the school choice movement in Idaho gain momentum significantly post-COVID. So COVID brought students home. It had students doing online school, and parents were seeing into the classroom in a way they hadn't seen before. You had parents that saw into that classroom and they said, wait, you're teaching my kids these things that I don't believe in, that don't support my values. I don't like what I see you're teaching in that public school system. You had other parents that said, wow, my student is really thriving with this at-home learning. I'm seeing a change in my student because all of this growth that they're learning. You had parents that said, I just learned what my kid didn't know. My student's a fourth grader and I just brought them home and whoa, what did they not know? So like Senator Thayn said, the kids that were thriving in those public schools, the parents saw a glimpse into those classrooms and they said, yep, my kid's doing great. This is a great fit for us. The traditional public school, how they're teaching, what they're teaching, that works for my family and for my student. But there were a lot of other parents that said, wait a second, now that I'm seeing into this classroom and I'm seeing my student in a different environment, I'm recognizing that my student is thriving with something different. So even though they didn't necessarily choose to bring their kids home when COVID happened, and some of them were actually really upset that that the public schools weren't offering an in-person option during that time. But there were a lot of parents that saw this at-home learning was good for their students and their families, and that I think also drove school choice. They saw that they have a choice. Whereas before, I think a lot of parents didn't even think about it. They went to the school they were zoned to. It's just what you did because that was normal. And COVID changed that. It made parents recognize that we have a choice and we care more about our kids than anybody else. And we want that say, not to just give it over to the teachers union and say, yeah, you teach our kids, you know best. Parents learned that they can do this and they want to.
So I crunched some numbers several months ago and identified the number of school-age students there are in the state of Idaho. And then I started saying, well, how many are homeschooled? An estimate. How many are going to private schools? How many are going to charter schools? How many are doing the PSIMS or ILA model? Because there's 6 or 7 school districts doing that model. And when I added all those up, 30% or more of students in Idaho are not going to their local brick and mortar school. So this is past the tipping point. We'll never go back to a captive audience in the public school. In fact, my local school district is going to open up an ILA type model for its patrons this year. And I think in order to compete, because parents have choices now, schools are going to have to react and offer more options.
So if we are to the tipping point and families and parents are choosing this, why is there also so much pushback against this movement?
Well, any institution wants to takes on a life of its own. It's like a living organism, so it tries to protect itself. And what school choice means is change. So change is uncomfortable for most people, so they fight against it. There's also the idea that if you look at a family, especially a young family, just has their first kid in school possibly, they probably don't have very many resources, much experience. You think, why are we giving a young family choices on how to teach their kids? Because we've got experts in schools. They've been trained teachers. Surely these trained teachers can do better than these naive, inexperienced parents. Well, a couple of things. One is God trusts parents. That's who has kids, inexperienced young people. But also, it's a philosophical question. What is the purpose of life? Is it to avoid chaos and let the most capable people make all the decisions? Or is it a learning process? If this is a learning process, which I think it is, then you want to give choices to parents so they can make those choices. Another thing about institutions, I kind of got off your question a little bit, but institutions aren't very flexible. If a parent sees that a math curriculum is not working, they can't take 2 years to make that change through the political process. They need to make that change the next day. This idea of trusting parents versus the institution is counterintuitive, especially if you're one that believes the experts should make decisions.
And I think you also have some of those experts, specifically like the teachers union, who are pushing back about anything that moves students out of under their control. So the teachers union at a national level, as they can define curriculum, they can define what's taught, they can use that classroom as a way to teach students in the coming generation the things that they feel are important, which may or may not align with what parents feel are important. And so I think sometimes that's part of the background, and they don't necessarily understand that our model still brings in those expert teachers to work with parents to help those parents become better at teaching their children. So we don't just say in our model, okay, parent, go figure it out. You're on your own. Tough luck. Sink or swim. It's all on you. We say, you know what, parent? You know your child best. Help us learn about what you know about your child, and we're going to walk alongside you. When you start to feel like you're drowning, just reach up. We're right here. We're going to help you. Or ideally, before you hit that drowning point, we're going to give you the resources. We're going to help you build the boat that you need for your student to be successful, and help you find the resources and the curriculum, and help you know what's out there and what's good that's out there and what's not good, and help you be successful in this. Think of this kind of like somebody going to a gym, right? I can exercise on my own. I know how to get healthy. I can figure it out. I can read books. But if I go and I sign up to work with a personal trainer and they're helping me know what is best for me at this time in my situation, they have all of that education. They can help me know what to do to be more successful, and they help keep me on track with motivation. They help keep me on track with accountability. So I will be more successful if I'm working with a personal trainer at being healthy. Parents can be more successful at teaching their kids at home when they also have that support that we provide for them. So again, we are kind of that perfect model that parents have that freedom and flexibility, but also that support to help them be successful.
Yeah, and seeing how long our public school system has been around in our country to now changing the mindset to being open, you can see why that's hard for people, absolutely. But I love that we can work as a team with our families and with our parents to help alongside them, because they definitely know their kids best. So Senator Thayn, you've already mentioned the red state strategy. So let's tell everybody what the red state strategy is, and has it had an impact in Idaho?
Yeah, that's a really important point to cover. So this book written by Corey DeAngelis, it's called The Parent Revolution. He got his doctorate in educational philosophy or whatever it was, and he realized that school choice had been developing by trying to make it a bipartisan effort between the Democrats and the Republicans, because it really shouldn't be a partisan effort. But he decided that actually that's not working very well. So he came up with the red state strategy, which is in Republican states, what to do in Republican states. And he found that because the Democrat Party which is about 90% of the teachers union campaign contributions go to Democrats. And so the Democrats are beholden to the teachers union. And so they vote against school choice measures. And so what he came up with is we need to work on the Republicans. We need to make the Republican Party the party of school choice. We need to make the Republican Party the parent choice, the parent party. And what he came up with was the idea that in order to win on school choice was to show frustrated families that school choice was the answer to their frustrations. You couldn't change the system from the top down. You had to come from the bottom up. If parents can leave the system, or if they have other options, then the system has to respond. So school choice is the answer for parents that are frustrated. That was the first thing. The second step was turn up the heat on state legislators, particularly, Republican legislators. And the third step was to make school choice a litmus test. If they weren't in favor of school choice, then to run someone against them in the primary. One of the governor from, if I get the right state, Iowa, the governor from Iowa, wanted some school choice legislation. And I think it was a woman, Renelson is her name. It got defeated because some anti-school choice Republicans teamed up with the Democrats. So she did something unusual. She went out and got 9 people to run against those 9 Republicans who voted against school choice. 8 of those Republicans, so these are incumbents that were defeated. 8 of those Republicans were defeated. So the next year they had a very robust school choice bill that passed. And that played out in West Virginia. It's played out in Texas. It's played out in a couple of other states. And it played out in Idaho too. In 2024, there was a school choice bill brought, and the chairman of the House Education Committee at the time, actually a pretty good friend of mine, opposed the bill, Julie Yamamoto, and she got defeated in the next primary. So the next year, the House and the Senate and the governor signed House Bill 93 in 2025. So that's how it's played out in Idaho. So there's a national effort. We're fitting into a national effort, and Idaho's pretty late to the party when you come to the realization there's already 31 states that have done something more aggressive than Idaho.
And I think a key piece of this is to recognize, just with our ILA families, the size of our voting if legislators come out and say, we're going to shut your program down. Because we ran the numbers, and in most of the different districts throughout the state, we actually would have had enough families that we could have turned the tide of the primary, the last election, if there would have been another candidate running that we said, you know what, you're coming against what we care about and what matters for our kids. Well, we're going to find somebody that's better, and we're going to run them against you. And we have enough of a voting block that we can make this in Idaho a strategy that we can say, if you're not going to support us, then you just have all of these mama bears and papa bears that are going to come after you, because this is what we care about. And when you look at the Republican platform, which Idaho is primarily the Republican, a lot of your candidates are going to vote or think the same way on a lot of those policy issues and things that are, this is how the Republicans believe. But the school choice right now is one that not all of the Republicans have gotten on board with. And it's one that the Democrats, I feel like we can even continue working there and making school choice something that they understand better and they can see. Just because your district maybe swings more Democrat doesn't mean that we can't share our stories and work there as well. But in those districts that are going to elect a Republican, we just need to help make sure that it's a Republican that will understand that school choice matters. And we need to make our current legislators understand that if they come against school choice, they will be against what their constituents want right now.
In fact, the data out of Texas is that 88% of the Republican primary voters supported school choice. Only 83% were pro-life. And there's a similar in Oklahoma. And I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't the case here in Idaho. I just haven't seen the data yet.
So you've mentioned that there's 31 states and like maybe 69 programs that are similar, that have the school choice to them. Can you tell us a little bit more about those? Like, do they have ESA? Do they have vouchers? Do they choose their curriculum?
Choosing the curriculum hasn't come to the top of the school choice debate as aggressively as it should. The homeschoolers do it, and they've done a wonderful job paving the way for this whole thing, to be very honest. But they include education savings accounts, school vouchers, tax credit education savings account, which, interestingly, in President Trump's big, beautiful bill, there's about $40 million for Idaho for a tax credit education savings account. And how that works, it's kind of like a tax credit scholarship. I'm reading from a book from ed choice for these. Tax credit scholarship basically is on your federal taxes. You can donate up to, I think, $1,700, either starting, I think, next tax season. I'm not absolutely sure what year it starts, but it's in this last bill. And you can deduct dollar for dollar off your federal taxes and give it to a scholarship granting organization. And then the scholarship granting organization, which is here in Idaho, and the Idaho legislature will make the rules on what those scholarships can be given for. Typically, they give them to students going to private schools, but I think we could be more inventive than that if we wanted to make it so they could go to micro schools and different things. But individual tax credits and deductions, we've got, well, other types of school choice. So you could go state by state. They list 31 states, and now Idaho is 32. And each one of them is a little bit different. Some of them deal with at-risk students or students in schools that aren't doing very well, or disabled students, special needs students. So there's a whole variety. Florida, Arizona, West Virginia, and a couple of others have some universal school choice bills. Basically, you can take half the money that, or even more, that is being spent on public schools and go anywhere you want. So there's 5 or 6, I think there's 6 states that do that now.
And I think the models are going to continue to evolve as these different states try different things. We see the research, what's working, what do families like. I think we're just at the beginning of this cusp that it's going to say we're still looking for different options, and we don't want to end up with just one school choice option. We're not trying to just reinvent our public schools to have one new different choice. We want to have this whole smorgasbord of choices, just like we do in our capitalism system, where you can go to whatever doctor's office you want, you can go to whatever grocery store you want. That we want more choices, because I think people are starting to understand that our kids are not all the same. And I loved one of the things he brought up in the book. He talked about the parents' party, that a lot of our people voting are focused on their kids and their parents, and he actually referred to it as the kids get their own union. And he talked about how what people are invested in and what they care about now is their kids. And so in a lot of ways, kids are becoming that special interest group that's driving the policy, as parents are saying, my kid is not just a robot that fits the box like everybody else. My kid has unique needs, and I want to help my kid develop their talents and focus on what they need. And I think that's really where part of this drive comes from, is we're no longer trying to create a conveyor belt system where everybody comes out of school with the exact same skills and exact same knowledge, because so much of that knowledge base I can pull up on my phone. I don't need to know who was president in 1927 or whatever year you pick. I can Google that if I need that information. But what kids need to learn now is they need to learn how to critically think, to evaluate information, to develop their skills and talents and their strengths, because that rote memorization, that's going to be replaced by AI. If you just need somebody that can pull facts from the internet, you're not going to need a person who can do that anymore. What we're going to need going forward are kids who can think and prepare and understand and evaluate, because we're preparing our kids right now for jobs that don't exist right now. Our world is moving so fast technology-wise that the jobs that my younger kids are going to have probably haven't been created yet. And it's hard to envision what will that look like, because you've got this shift. And so right now, that's what parents are looking for, is every parent is trying to say, how do I prepare my kids for this world they're going to live in that's coming, that is beyond what I can even imagine right now.
Amen.
Go ahead.
No.
Yeah, I think the question of like how can we prepare our kids to go out and innovate and change this world? I think that's when we start thinking that way and seeing the unique needs of our own kids, it's pretty powerful and amazing to think about what they'll be able to do when they come to the time that they can change this world. So that kind of covered how important it is for parents to be able to choose curriculum for their children. Do we want to talk about that anymore? Like, why is it so important for parents to be able to choose the curriculum?
I have a hard time explaining things that just seem so obvious to me. But most of the disasters in public education, from new math, new math, 1619 project, critical race theory, all these things have come from experts, not from parents. Parents are interested in what works. They're not interested in recreating reality. And that's kind of what we have going on as a public school system. And I don't mean to criticize all teachers, because I was one. There's a lot of great teachers that are caught up in this system, but the system has been taken over by people who don't. The system entirely, it's an entirety is more dominated by those that don't think the American founding was inspired, that there's nothing special about it, that the founders were corrupt men. And there's just so much that isn't true that they're being taught. And if parents don't want that taught, they need to be able to choose the curriculum. And I think this is something the national school choice movement needs to understand. Can I move on to what's going on with virtual schools in Idaho?
Absolutely. Yes.
So here's kind of what I see in the background. You have something called Bloom, which receives federal funding. It's been associated with the Albertsons Foundation, and they're very much into charter schools. And my impression of charter schools, or of Bloom, and Terry Ryan is another friend of mine, but I disagree with my friends, so those are the best kinds. They like charter schools that have high test scores. And so they like Gem Prep Academy. They like the classical, American Classical academies, and that's based on the Hillsdale model. So they don't like charter schools. That's basically what ILA is a charter school. That reflects bad upon them, because so these virtual charter schools aren't doing as well as the brick and mortar ones generally. And so between that and those not really recognizing why test scores in the PSIMS or the parent curated model aren't as high as some others, there's some effort to shut down virtual schools in Idaho, which makes no sense, because I'm going to be an institute teacher next year on a college campus virtually that has over 80,000 students. Virtual is an option. You're not going to take it away. But I think there is an effort to do away with virtual. What I would recommend for these legislators that are concerned about test scores or other things is to recognize two things. One, the reason parents have gone to these other models is because they're not succeeding in public schools. That's the main reason, either academically or bullying or whatever. Secondly, rather than fighting against them, they ought to partner with us and say, what can we do to make them better? Let's work together on that. So, but there was an effort last session to curtail or even do away with virtual schools, and that will be an issue this next session as well.
And I think part of that is from a misunderstanding of what virtual schools are. Some of those legislators believe that our kids are sitting in front of a computer all day. They're never interacting with real people. They never have the opportunity to be involved in real life, which if you're part of ILA, that's probably not what's happening in your home. Sometimes it feels like there's so many cool, real experiences that my kids have the opportunity to be part of that it can be hard to get that online time to do school, right? And so I think that's part of it. Is those looking at virtual schools as a not good option for kids are generally looking at only one measure of success, and that's public test scores. And so are our students doing as well on the IRI, on the ISAT? No, they're not. And so we are working to do the benchmarks and add in some things this year to help support our students so they are on a little bit more of a fair playing field. When the kids in traditional school are practicing those tests every month and our kids see them twice a year, well, our kids are obviously not going to score as well simply because they haven't had the same exposure as those kids in the traditional schools. So we're incorporating a few things in our testing plan to try to help show that our kids with the right preparation can score well on the tests as well. But we also need to help our legislators see that that's not the only definition of success. I've heard stories from parents that their student was really struggling with bullying and was suicidal when they were in public school in a traditional setting. They brought them home. Their student's now thriving emotionally and mentally. They may not be back to where they should be according to the test scores, but their student is alive and their student is doing well and they are thriving in ways that the test doesn't measure. And we also have kids that have left that traditional system because it didn't work for them, because their students learn differently, their kids have learning challenges or disabilities, all of those different pieces as well, that they're coming already behind because the system that they tried didn't fit them and it wasn't a good fit. On the other hand, the charter schools like Gem Prep, they advertise to and draw in students who are wanting a more advanced accelerated education. Gem Prep promotes that most of their students end with associate's degree. Well, you're only going to choose that option if that's a path that seems like a good fit for your kids. And so I have kids that have finished high school with a good number of college credits through the Advanced Opportunities Program. I have kids that have graduated without any college credits because they just needed to finish their high school curriculum. And I think that's part of the issue, is that the kids that want that really accelerated education might choose those really accelerated different. Love the image that has all the different animals, the fish and the monkey and the elephant, and it says if you judged every animal by its ability to climb a tree, you'd have a lot of animals that failed in life. And so I think that's where we're looking, that we're using one measure to say, are these kids successful, which may not be the best measure to use, but that's also kind of a whole nother ballgame of where those test scores are and how you evaluate growth and success and what success looks like. And I think that's why it's so important to have parents be involved, because nobody cares more about your kids than you do. So if success for this child of yours may be that they learn a trade and they go on to become an electrician because they're great with their hands and they understand intuitively how electricity works, but maybe they aren't the best at writing an MLA formatted paper because that's not their strength, and you want to build and work towards their strengths because you see the strengths in your kids in a way that nobody else does. And then you might have another student that they are fascinated by the medical world, but they struggle with, I don't know, PE or some other area that is not their strength. And so that's why having parents involved makes such a difference, because nobody cares more about your kids than you do. Nobody cares more about their success and making the sacrifices and doing the research and finding the curriculum that works for them. I know I've had kids that struggled to read, and some of my kids, I was on the third or fourth curriculum program before I finally found something that clicked and we had success. I have 3 different math programs I'm currently using with my kids to learn math because they learn differently. And in a traditional school, a teacher doesn't have that flexibility, because if they've got 30 students, they can only personalize that education so much. And with virtual schools and the resources we have, there's now online curriculum, there's in-person classes, and the curriculum that's available has come so far in the last 20 years since I started. Like what you had available 20 years ago and what parents have available now to choose from, it's night and day difference of how much better the resources and how much more accessible those resources have become. And it's just going to continue to move forward and continue to have better resources available.
Yeah. Do we want to go back and talk about what ILA is and how it fits into the school choice debate, or do we kind of want to move towards our last question of like what can families do to advocate for this model?
I think we've pretty much covered that, haven't we, Janet?
I think so. Yeah, ILA has about 10,000 students, and I think our legislators just need to know this is a model that parents choose, because not a single family is part of our program that didn't choose it, because nobody is district in to come to ILA. Every student in ILA has had a parent who chose this model and looked for something different than what they were zoned for.
So now that we know that so many of us have chosen this model, we want this model, we want school choice. Obviously, we're here because we chose to be here with ILA and Home Ed 360. What can we do to advocate for this model? We have seen that this has been an issue in legislature, and we know that it's going to be an issue this next year in legislature. So we briefly touched on it, but tell us more about what families can do to advocate for school choice, and especially for ILA and Home Ed 360.
Well, Janet, I think you have a couple of ideas you ought to share first.
I think first is getting to know your legislators. I think that's huge. Letting your legislators know this matters to you. Sometimes it has taken people multiple calls, multiple times following up with their legislators. We will be working with a lobbyist and with ILA and setting up some activities where we will be inviting some legislators to come get to know you and get to know your students. And the message I think the legislators need to hear is, why does this choice work for your family? Why did you choose this program and why is it working for you? I think that's one step, is let your legislators know that this matters. Second is, if your legislator is one that is not supportive of this movement, then work within your community and find someone willing to run against them next May. Next year is a election year, and we can rally together our families and we can put up signs. We can make this an election year issue if the legislators won't listen to us right now. So that red state strategy is come into play a little bit in Idaho, as our legislators want to be seen as part of the school choice movement. But I think a big piece of it is, if our legislators won't listen to us, we make that the issue in the 2026 election, and we vote out those who won't support school choice, because we let them know this is the issue that matters to us right now.
Don't you also have a Facebook group?
We do. We have a Idaho Parents Lobbying for Virtual Education Facebook group. So that is open not just to ILA families, but any family who is part of virtual education in the state of Idaho or cares about virtual education and school choice. So we use that group to try to keep you updated about events or meetings that are happening around the state where you can show up and be involved and have a voice. And then we ask you to report back to share what you're finding. It's a very open Facebook group, like our Home Ed 360 Facebook group. It's not moderated other than to keep out spammers, but we want that open discussion. We want you to talk on there and say, this is the conversation I had with this legislator and here's what they said. I believe this legislator's in support of our model. This legislator won't respond to me. Because what it's going to take this next year is a coordinated effort. Even this year, as we were looking at the legislation that was coming through, we were trying to compile who are our legislators that are for or against. So for anything to pass the legislature, you have to have half of the senators that vote for it and half of the House members that vote for it. So in either of those, the House or the Senate, we need to know who we can trust is on our side, who we need to educate more, and who is against us, and who we need to try to vote out this next year. And so that group is a way to try to pull in anybody who's interested and willing to get involved and coordinate and organize that. And we invite you to invite your friends. This is something that's not just affecting our ILA parents. Grandparents are affected by this because they want options for their grandkids. Your neighbors are affected by this. So as you invite and we grow that group, it will help us be a bigger voice. And that group helps us show legislators we have this many Idaho parents or Idaho voters who care about this and will make it an issue this year.
And I'd like to add to that this is a critical time in Idaho. In other states like Arizona, they passed the Universal School Choice Bill. And then they have a thing where you can get signatures and have an initiative to do away with a bill that was passed the previous year. And 2 years before, I think it's 2023, 2 or 3 years, those opposed to choice were able to kill a school choice proposal through the initiative process. The next time it came around, the parents in favor of school choice started texting each other where they were gathering signatures, and they showed up and they explained about school choice and how it worked, and found out that most people were more interested in school choice than in getting rid of it, and they didn't get enough signatures. But it's that critical time period when the pushback, because we have a pushback, that we make sure we weather the storm, because I think as we move ahead, this will just get better. Janet's been doing this for almost 20 years, but as we get more heads together, she's been doing better and better, I'm sure, the last few years, learning more and more. And I think the whole system will get better. And it's dependent upon parents being interested and figuring better ways to do it. But that requires some ability to innovate. And that's basically what we're asking for. That's what school choice is. The last point I think I'd like to make is that I view this as the second American Revolution. It's been almost over 250 years since the first one. And this is about taking back our power from unelected education system that really makes a difference on what the citizens of the United States will be thinking in the next 50 to 100 years. It's the kids that are being educated now that will control the country when they're adults. This is really critical. The homeschool movement started in the 1980s when I became aware, and it's just picking up speed, and it's just positive. We're not out to fire teachers. We're not out to destroy the public school system, even though they might think we are. We're just out to destroy the makeup of the public school system. It will survive and be fine, but it's got to adapt. And that's what the ILA system does, is it gives flexibility to public schools to adapt.
Well, and I think we have a great model. I love the model that we've built. I love the way we've been able to structure this within ILA. But there may be something coming as we evolve and we morph and we change, as new ideas come out, that's even better. And as education opens up and we see these different options and different people bring their brains together, the goal is to bring the best options for our kids out there. And if the ILA model isn't the model that it ends up being the best model, that's okay, because our goal is to bring choice and opportunities to families and to individuals and to open up that world of education. I had one of the legislators tell me that our movement last spring of 2025, was the biggest grassroots movement that she had seen at the State House in the 10 years she's been there, from a group of individuals that made calls and reached out that weren't behind a lobbyist group or led by a lobbyist. It was just a bunch of us reaching out and trying to share what mattered to us. And so we made some noise last year and we were heard, and we just need to continue doing that, because we need our state to continue moving forward and moving on to the leadership of this school choice option, of saying, how do we make the best school choice options for our students, and what does that look like? And it trickles back both directions. So the things that are found that works really well in public school, those trickle into our homes, and the things that we can find that work really well in our homes can trickle back into public schools and benefit all of the kids. And our goal is to have an educated society where every kid gets to build and learn to their strengths, and choices help us build that better.
So let's innovate, let's create, let's work together. Thank you to both of you, because you guys have done that. You've been transparent, you've been open, you've been talking to people and helping us to work as a team to innovate and create, so that we can make a world where there's more school choice and that parents can have a say and have our voices heard. I am going to add the links to the Facebook page, and I will also add the link to the legislature page, so you can find your district and find who your senators and representatives are, so that you can reach out to them if you don't already know. And yeah, let's get our voices heard, and let's keep this amazing movement going, so that we can make a change, and that we can be heard, and that we can give our kids the best world and the best options out there to innovate and create and change this world.
Perfect. I will add, Senator Thayn does have a podcast that he shares stuff on YouTube, so we'll make sure you have that link and we can add that as well. His are usually much shorter than this long podcast that we have today, but he does a great job of helping you be aware of some of the issues that are happening and why and what is happening. And like he said, you may not always agree with everything that he says, but that's how great discussions happen, is by sharing your ideas, sharing your thoughts, talking it through. Sometimes that's where you come up with the best compromise, is because you have people on two different sides that say, here's why this is important to me, here's why this is important to me, and let's find a compromise. And I feel like what we are offering really is the perfect compromise between the school choice and the traditional public school, of bringing in the best of both worlds. So thanks for taking the time to listen to this, and thanks for taking the time to get involved, because every single voice matters and every single connection will matter this year. And so as we bring this forward, we can make an impact for our kids that I think will last for a really long time.
I think you said it all, Janet. Thanks, everybody.